So it looks like there's no shortage of outlets that got their chance to play Red Dead Redemption 2 and post their findings online, much to the delight of us fans who are eagerly awaiting for this game's release. A very recent example in this regard is coming our way from a magazine called The Digital Spy, and they have posted their very own hands-on preview this past weekend. The article itself contains a lot of fine details that every other big news outlet so far seems to have missed, and honestly these are the types of articles that I enjoy the most. The type that comes from people who don't just play by the script but instead go down the beaten path to explore details that others have not even thought about. Just like how it was with the Red Bull preview I've talked about last week, which by the way I find to be probably the best I've seen so far, the Digital Spy one also strays away from the mundane and brings in new stuff that we can learn about, and there's definitely a lot of information newly added in this, and we have stuff on character fatigue, on animations, on gang rewards, as well as the story time frame, as in the time frame in which the story in Red Dead Redemption 2 takes place in. So if you don't want to get this spoiled to you, or if you don't want to know about this, then simply skip this first part, but it should not affect you in any way, shape or form, as it's just a minor detail even compared to everything that has been shown and we've seen so far. But I know some folks are sensible to this, which is why I wanted to mention it. So one of the most important pieces of news that coincidentally only gets mentioned towards the end of the article is about the time frame in which the story in Red Dead Redemption 2 takes place. According to the article, Rockstar Games confirmed that the game takes place over weeks, as we see Arthur Morgan's ragtag gang, including Red Dead Redemption's anti-hero John Marston and the last game's antagonist Dutch Vanderlinde, fall apart as the Wild West gets tamed. What's most striking to me is that between the first Red Dead Redemption and the second one, which is also its prequel, there's a gap of about 10 years that we don't really get to play. We know some of the details that have been happening in that time frame, but we don't get to play them, so there's a lot of potential story that can still be filled, which kind of makes me think that Rockstar Games is putting things off for possibly a third installation of this game for a possible Red Dead Redemption 3 somewhere down the line, but probably it's going to be like another 10 years or so, but it definitely fits that scenario. Also, having a DLC happening years later could be a possibility, though I doubt that, and I'm more inclined towards another game being like kept in the background just for a later release. But yeah, we're still talking about Red Dead Redemption 2, so I'm not gonna dwell too much in here. I'm not gonna talk about the story too much as I don't want to enter spoilers territory. I just wanted to put this out there, and I think it's important to know that the game takes place over several weeks, probably a month, because this kinda indirectly confirms that we will not be having seasons in Red Dead Redemption 2. So in a previous video of mine, I was talking about how there were rumors about seasons or a seasonal mechanic being a thing in Red Dead Redemption 2, and at that time it made sense. Like, having a dynamic seasonal mechanic definitely made sense in the setting of Red Dead Redemption 2, because we know animal behavior changes depending on seasons, but now it kinda doesn't make sense even from a lore point of view, and I don't think that Rockstar Games would sacrifice that immersion just to add in this mechanic, especially if it wouldn't make sense from like a story point of view, because from what we've seen so far, they have been very meticulous with every single detail they have added to this game. So I'm just putting it down there. To me, it sounds like it indirectly infirms that there's going to be any seasons coming to this game. But moving on, we have a very interesting detail on what happens if you neglect feeding Arthur for extended periods of time, and this shows just how much detail has been put in this game. Like, we already knew that not eating would make your HP regen slower, even make you lose weight and so on, but nobody tested this in game to see how the effects themselves look like. Well, thanks to Digital Spy, we get to know exactly how that happens, and there are both visual cues as well as animation changes. On one hand, Arthur will start looking exhausted from not eating anything, and this is a visual cue that will most probably be accentuated. If you're running a lot, fighting a lot, not eating anything, you will visually see these changes on Arthur. First, he's going to get slimmer, but you're going to see it on his face, as in his face will be completely changed because of this. He will look completely exhausted and, as the article puts it, like shit. On the other hand, even the way Arthur walks will be affected, so he'll start dragging his feet, swaying from side to side exactly like someone would in real life when experiencing small doses of famine. So this sounds pretty interesting to me because we didn't know this detail. I mean, we knew it would get slimmer and it would affect our HP, but we didn't know that there are so many cues to this, which sounds really freaking cool. Small cues that add so much to the overall gameplay, and it's the type of detail that you can get a lot of laughs out of. Like what would happen if you dressed Arthur as if he was preparing for a heavy blizzard and then have him take a long walk in the desert in the scorching heat with no food and no water available. It would most probably end up in him going unconscious or possibly even dying, but it would be definitely fun to look at. It would be something really fun, and it would probably get a few laughs out of people testing this. I mean, I know I will be doing this because it gives you so many possibilities. And since we're still on the subject of movement and animation, these will also be influenced by your weight. So getting fatter means you'll also walk differently, not just walk slower. So in previous games that had this feature, if you got fatter you would run slower, but the animations in Red Dead Redemption 2 will also change to compensate this. So you'll move differently, you will look awkward, and I think this would be inversely true with the skinny version, as in you would be more nimble on your toes, but yeah, it depends on how skinny or fat the game lets us become. Still, I'm very curious to see if Arthur can be made to become obese and possibly even die of a heart attack while running, just like how it was in the old San Andreas, but I guess we will have to wait and see for this one. Another useful piece of detail that comes in regards of your fellow gang members and the benefits that await you if you choose to help them out more. As you may or may not know, helping the Vanderlyn gang with supplies, money, and generally spending time with your fellow gang members will increase the overall morale, but it's not something that you have to do. I mean, Rockstar Games have said that this is not a constraint that you have to worry about. You can completely ignore the gang itself and you won't really have your gameplay affected too much. But the article sheds a bit more light on what happens if you in fact do pitch in and help the gang out and like take part in every activity all the way. But what I was trying to say is that doing side missions and having conversations with the 23 gang members will give you bonus items eventually as you unlock more progression, and it's a very good way of making a mechanic rewarding while still keeping it semi-optional. Chatting with gang members at the campfire will reveal hints to hidden items that can prove of great use in your journey. They might even criticize you should you choose to neglect these. On top of eating meals there, you can also restock your ammunition, and ammunition in turn is displayed with 3 color indicators depending on how sparse the supplies are, which can be in red, yellow, or white. We also get a few colorifications on the combat controls themselves. Unarmed combat allows Arthur to lock onto his foes and holding up his arms to block or even dodge attacks before landing punches, headbutts, and grapples. It's also being explained that larger enemies can't be grabbed outright and instead have to be worn down before doing so. The combat was described to be deeper than previous games, and I'm expecting a few mechanics and combat rules to govern the hand-to-hand combat, but nothing that will make it too frustrating. Besides, it was already reported to feel great and to be very satisfying, so I have no doubt that hand-to-hand combat is going to be amazing, but now we kinda know a few more details about it. Coming up next, we have hunting, and prey was reported to be rated between 1 and 3 stars upon examination. So every time you hunt and kill an animal, if you examine it, it might be between 1 or 3 stars, with 1 being the worst and 3 being the best, of course. This will also affect the resulting quality of the meat as well as its price on the market, and while it wasn't specifically mentioned to be the same with pelts, I'm also expecting these as well as the animal skins to have some sort of quality indicator, as we already know that shot placement and weapon used will affect the quality of the pelts. So it might not be a star rating for pelts, but something that might indicate if it's in perfect condition, ruined, or along those lines is something I'm expecting. This also implies meat quality influences food quality, and in turn the bonuses you get from it. I would assume that food made out of 3-star only ingredients would give better bonuses compared to something of lesser quality. Last but not least, we have mission rewards, which for the most part will be in cents, by the way, rather than in dollars, and this makes sense from an economical point of view, as back then, which is like over 100 years ago, $1 would get you much more than nowadays, so it makes sense to be rewarded in cents. But don't worry, as you will still be able to earn big bucks, but these are mostly reserved for bounties and bank heists, which are much more lucrative. This also means that you'll want to avoid being in conflict with the law too often in the beginning, as you'll have to pay increasingly more expensive bounties to get the lawman off your head, and depending on where you commit the crimes and who you kill, the bounty can increase by quite a lot. So you can get a $250 bounty on your head really easily by just a one killing session, which is quite hard to, like, you know, pay in the beginning hours of the game. But for the most part, this is all the info that we managed to get from this article. It's in the description box if you want to read it. So yeah, it's pretty cool. It doesn't contain too many spoilers except for like the story length, but that is pretty much it. The time frame is the only one that is being shown. But yeah, go ahead and check the article if you want to. In the meantime, don't forget to aim that like button if you enjoyed this video. Also subscribe to the channel for more awesome content for Red Dead Redemption 2, and I'll see you guys next time.